Today, friends, I want to talk to you about commission terminology and why some of it, one thing in particular, is very confusing. If you've ever commissioned a miniature painter before, you'll know that it can be sometimes a little bit confusing trying to work out what you're getting for your money or even what it is that you want for your money. There's a lot of weird terminology that floats around in commission painting, and one of the things that seems to be a particular bugbear for a lot of people is the classes or levels of painting. So a lot of commission painters these days will tend to use the terms tabletop, tabletop plus, display, and competition. And I think we can sort of pull competition out of that because that's fairly obvious. Competition is, paint to the very best, the absolute pinnacle of your ability, do the absolute best job you can, paint this as if you were trying to win a Slayer sword. That's pretty straightforward. I think we can also push tabletop aside for the most part, because again, Games Workshop sort of has this term battle ready, which they've used for such a long time now that we're all very familiar with it. And so I think the vast majority of us kind of take tabletop to mean base coats done nice and neatly with some shades applied over that to bring some depth in. Maybe if it's a particularly simple job you might do some, a little bit of edge highlighting, but for the most part it's sort of base coats and shades, and then you'll finish the bases nicely. And you can see here I've got this little demonstration of a squad of word bearers that I was commissioned to do, that I've done to a basic tabletop standard. So this is base coats and washes. Now those two terms in the middle are where it really starts to get a bit more complicated. When we're talking about tabletop plus and we're talking about display standard, what do those things really mean? Well, the thing is, for you as a buyer, those terms aren't really gonna make much sense, because what they really are is functional working terms for us, the commission painters, to use in order to work out what kind of job we're doing. So they kind of don't mean anything to the person buying the commission because they're sort of not supposed to. So here's an example. That tabletop standard squad that I recently painted, I worked out that it was going to take me about 10 hours to do that. That included time to apply transfers, time to do the basing on them, getting them all nicely base coated, getting those shades on them and everything. It's a fairly simple job, but when you add in things like, transfers and basing and stuff like that, you're going to come out to somewhere in and around the region of 10 hours, at least for me at my painting speed. Now that's 10 hours of work, and I charge £10 an hour, so that's really simple. That's £100 for that job, no problem. But say if my customer wants to take it to Tabletop Plus, what are they actually getting from me, and what should you as a buyer commissioning anyone expect to get? Well, that's a really difficult question to answer, because the way I work out Tabletop Plus may not be the same as the way the next commission painter works out Tabletop Plus. So for me, if I decide that it's going to take me 10 hours to get a squad of 10 done to a tabletop standard, then if I'm quoting that same job at Tabletop Plus, I'm going to add about 50% work time on top. And that's 50% work time that's just dedicated to doing those extra things to make it nice. So we said that our commission was £100 at tabletop, and now with 50% added on top, it's £150 at high tabletop. Nice and easy. Now, sometimes, and quite often in fact, if I am quoting an upgrade from tabletop to high tabletop, I will sometimes bump a little bit extra on there, because I know that what I'm probably going to do is go back in and do some intermediary little things to kind of prepare from going to tabletop to high tabletop. I'm going to take some extra time just to tidy some little extra bits up at the end that maybe I wouldn't normally do. And this is why I tend to prefer my minimum commission level to be Tabletop Plus, because it's at Tabletop Plus standard where commission painters really start to be able to represent the quality of their work in what they produce. So let's continue talking about this specific commission. I have to now think about, what can I get done in 5 extra hours? Well, 5 extra hours, that's very easy to work out. That's an extra half an hour per miniature. So if I've got half an hour per miniature, what processes do I think I can do to bring this squad from tabletop to Tabletop Plus? First of all, let's say I can assign 10 minutes per miniature to just applying some nice textural highlights to the red armor. Now these aren't going to be smooth blended highlights. I can't really do that below display standard because I don't really have enough time to quote in the commission unless I'm trying to get that really fine high level finish. So I can do some nice textural highlights which will look really pretty, will give a good dynamic range, will make the miniatures look, like they've got good depth, good volume going on with them. but I'm not going to be able to do those really fine, smooth highlights within a high tabletop commission. So that's something that you could expect, and it's something that I can probably fit into the time. There's also quite a lot of black on these miniatures, and I would probably just go with pretty much an edge highlight on this. Again, maybe working in a little bit of texture, because again, I think I can do that in about 10 minutes per miniature. Black does take a little bit longer to highlight because you have to step up through about 3 or 4 grades of black to get something that looks fairly smooth. If you go for sort of just a 2-stage highlight with it, then it's just going to look a bit rough and a bit choppy, and that's not going to be as nice for your customer. At the end of the day, they are paying you for an upgraded paint job. So I allowed 10 minutes to get these miniatures done with all the nice black highlights, looking crispy, looking sexy. I've also got things like some silver areas, I've got some parchment areas, you know, smaller details on the miniature. Now, I don't think I have time to do really nice fine highlights on all of that. I've already used 20 minutes of my 30 minutes per miniature in the time that I've allotted for this upgrade. But I do think I can just place, you know, some selective highlights here and there on the parchments and on the silvers, just to make them look a little bit neater. It's only going to be maybe 5 minutes per miniature, but I think I can fit that in. And then with that remaining 5 minutes, how can I maximize how much punch we get on these miniatures, really push them to look as good as they can? Well, with just a couple of minutes per miniature, it's pretty easy to do a bit of scribble on that parchment, and because these are word bearers, a little bit of white scribble on the armour, which is very characteristic of them. So, you know, it's just some little sort of details, nothing too crazy, and that probably won't even take me the full 5 minutes. I probably have about a minute per miniature left after that. So I am saving that 1 minute for something at the end, which I'll show you in just a second, but that, you know, pretty much gives us an outline of what I can do to take a job from tabletop to high tabletop within the amount of money that I would quote. So if you think about the difference, in fact, instead of thinking about the difference, why don't I show you the difference? So here's that completed commission with all the miniatures elevated to high tabletop. Now, I did say that I saved about an extra minute in this job, and the reason I saved about an extra minute in this job is because I knew that when I was coming to doing the basing for these miniatures, at high tabletop, I'd probably spend a tiny bit of extra time. Instead of just putting some texture on them, I'd maybe glue in a few stones and, you know, just maybe kind of make them look a little bit nicer, maybe with a tuft. And I also figured that at a high tabletop commission, it'd be nice to just tap in some weathering powders around the feet to make those look a little bit better. A minute per miniature is more than enough to cover gluing a tuft on and stabbing on some weathering powders. So that brought me up to my full 30 minutes per miniature of extra time. So in terms of what your extra 50% on top of your commission cost got you, well, let's compare the two for difference. Let's go back to that piece of footage of the first original set, and then let's also look at the footage of the completed squad again, and let's see what we're actually getting for our money. So it's pretty clear to see that it's quite a significant upgrade from Tabletop to Tabletop Plus. And I'm sure if you've watched this channel before, you've seen plenty of miniatures that I've also painted to display standard. And so it's easy to understand what the upgrade is again from Tabletop to display. Now, honestly, when it comes to display to Tabletop, I'm probably quoting about triple. So if it's £100 commission to do at Tabletop standard, it's probably going to be about £300 to do at display. And that's because I'm really going to need all that extra time to make sure that every single miniature is beautifully blended, to make sure that everything is just exactly, you know, chef's kiss perfect. Because that's what you want from a display commission. You want everything to be really representative of the quality of your work. So when you as a customer are commissioning stuff, something that you can think about is what you want from the artist. You're never going to have universal terms that you can apply to every single paint job. My Tabletop Plus is not going to look like Tabletop Plus from any other commissioned painter. But what you can do is pick a painter whose work you like and then ask them, what can I get for this kind of budget? Or how far could you push these if this is how much I'm willing to spend, is maybe a simpler way of putting it. And that artist is going to be able to work with you. They're going to tell you what things they can fit into the amount of time that they would allow for that kind of budget. They're going to know what they value their own time at. As I said, I value my time at £10 an hour. That's only about £1.50 an hour more than national minimum wage for my age group in this country. So I'm actually very, very cheap considering that this is my full-time job. I don't make a lot of extra money above minimum wage, and the reason I do that is because I want customers to come to me. I want them to choose me, so I don't set my prices too high. However, some commission painters may well set their prices very, very high, and often in those cases you'll find they're the kind of commission painters that want to mostly work on display standard and competition standard pieces, and they set their prices high because they want to encourage customers to only come to them for their best work. That is a great thing for commission painters to do, and it's a great thing for you as a customer to understand, because if they're an expensive painter, it's probably a pretty good guarantee that they're going to consistently put out really, really good work. You have to bear in mind that not every painter wants to offer the full spectrum. For example, as I explained before, I don't like doing tabletop commissions. I don't like doing tabletop commissions because they're not very much fun to me. The base coating and shading stages are really the boring, process-driven parts of the miniature. And it's not until you start to get to the highlighting and detailing that I get to start to play and have fun and be creative and do interesting things. So with that in mind, those are the parts of the job that I really look forward to. Getting the most out of your commission is all about challenging your painter and offering them something that's interesting, finding the right painter for the job that you want done. It really pays to shop around, to look at the work of different painters, to find a painter whose work most matches your vision for how you want your miniatures to look. Once you've settled on that, figuring out the tier that they're going to paint to, the price that they're going to charge and all of that is just an integral part of the process. It's nice and simple and straightforward. So I hope if you're someone who's been considering commissioning for the first time, whether you're thinking about coming to me because you watch this channel or whether you're thinking about going to any other painter there, I hope that this video has armed you with some knowledge, some information, and helped you maybe understand why some of these terms are a little bit confusing. Just remember, they're not confusing because we're trying to make it difficult for you. They're confusing because the only way that we can really gauge the value of our work is in the time that we're going to spend on it. Time, after all, is the most expensive part of the commissioning process. The materials, by comparison, are relatively cheap. If you enjoyed this video and you felt that it was informative, you felt that it taught you some stuff that you maybe didn't know, feel free to hit that thumbs up button, let me know that you like it. You can of course also subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so that you can stay up to date on what I'm doing here on YouTube. There is also a Patreon campaign which you can support from as little as $1 a month if you want to help me keep the channel running. And with all that said and done, I'm going to get out of here now. Thank my existing patrons, roll those end credits. But I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody.